Let's start. All right, I think we're live. Can you hear me? All right. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. We've been working in this event for quite some time, and it's a pleasure for all of us at the React community in Costa Rica to have this amazing guest today and give us a brief talk about Remix. We are quite excited about Remix in general, and I'm pretty sure that you will enjoy this talk. So, first of all, we wanted to give some space to our sponsors. There are two companies that are behind this event, and they are generous enough to have provided a couple of gifts that we will raffle at the end of the meeting of the event. Sorry. So I would like to introduce Guayo Mena. He will be giving us an introduction about Parsley Health. Hi, Guayo. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very excited about the talk. I'm looking forward to it. I'm pretty sure you are as well. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Parsley Health. This is a health company. It's based in New York. We give services to the whole United States, but the company started in New York. And we have a lot of engineering positions open. So if you are looking for a job in a place that has a nice culture, we try to do good for people. It's a health company, and we work on very interesting projects. All our front end stack is written in React, so the stock is right for you. And so if you're looking for a place to work, just let me know. You can look for me in the React community Slack channel. I'm Guayo Mena, and or you can talk to Arturo or really anybody in this community. But yeah, I'm super excited. And the prize we have for you, the what we're gonna raffle at the end is a Platzi membership for a year. And we think that's really cool, because if you win it, you will be able to get some courses for a whole year. And yeah, I think it's a nice gift. Hopefully we're gonna keep getting some more gifts for the next meetup sessions. But yeah, thank you very much, and back to you, Arturo.
Thank you so much, Guayo. Yeah, the other sponsors that we have tonight is Telescope, and we have Max to talk a little bit about the company. So welcome, Max.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having us here. You know, we're really excited to be supporting the community. I think that what you guys are doing is incredibly valuable, and I hope that everybody enjoys the talk. I'm excited as well. I think that you've got a really nice event for tonight. And to tell you just briefly about Telescope, my name doesn't give it away, but I'm actually Costa Rican born and raised, so I've got a lot of passion for connecting and helping, you know, the amazing engineering talent we've got in the country with first-class opportunities in the US. And that's really what Telescope is focused on. Our mission is the pursuit of autonomy, purpose, and opportunity for the talented people of the world. And we see remote work as a way to achieve that. So for us, you know, putting the engineers front and center, getting to know each one of you, you know, over the next few days, weeks, months, years, however long it takes, we're on a mission to help connect you with the best opportunities in the US, career-changing opportunities, working on, you know, really challenging but really exciting projects using the latest technologies, and truly being part of a team that cares about you, invests in you. And, you know, this is the kind of us also showing the community that we're going to participate, be involved, invest in, you know, not only this community, but other places to help everybody improve their skills, their knowledge, and their access to better opportunities. Because obviously, what's happening with remote work is going to open a lot of opportunities for people today and into the future. We're excited to be part of this opportunity to continue learning side by side with all of you. I commend all of you for being here, taking your time in an evening to learn. I think the first step towards achieving anything great is action, and everyone who's here, is taking an action by just showing up, paying attention, learning, networking, and getting to know some of the other folks here. So with that, I'll let you guys get on with the event. And again, thank you for allowing us to be a small part of this, and helping you organize and support you with the gifts. I hope you guys enjoy them.
Thank you so much, Max. And thank you to Parsley Health and Telescope, of course. And yeah, well, it's a pleasure for me to introduce tonight's guest. I think that everybody attending this event is a fan of him. With no more, the one and only Kenzie Dodds.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just am really honored to be a guest for this meetup. And I'm really excited to talk about Remix. It's this thing that I've just really fallen in love with over the last little bit. So thank you for tuning in and giving me some of your time. I'm going to start by apologizing for my voice. I am getting over a really bad cold. I've been sick for over a week now, or about a week. Yeah, it's been such a pain. But we're on the tail end. It was not COVID. We tested and we're good. But yeah, what a pain. So let me share my screen and we will get started here. And if I could ask the folks or moderators, I guess, to show my screen as well, that would be great, so that you all can see. There we go. So Remix, if you go to remix.run, that's the official website for Remix. It's a web framework. And I want to tell you a little bit of a story of how I got involved with Remix, because it kind of illustrates what Remix is all about. So let's see, I guess this is about a year ago. This is what my website looked like. This was built with Gatsby using the state-of-the-art static site generation for the fastest app you could ever have, because you pre-generate all the HTML, you put those HTML files on servers all over the world, the CDN, and then wherever a person is in the world, they're pretty close to a copy of your website. And so you go to the blog, you go to the podcast, the workshops, all of these sites load really fast because it's just static HTML that's on a server. Now, of course, when you load the site, it's hydrated and everything, so it's client transitions for these. But the idea is that the initial load, even without a cache of any kind, is going to be really fast because it's just static HTML. So I was using Gatsby for this, and I was pretty happy with it. I was able to do some cool things that my old website before this one I couldn't do. But I did run into a number of problems. For one, to create all of that HTML in the first place takes a little bit of time. And when you have as many pages as I do, where we have a page for every podcast, we have a page for every workshop, we have, a page for every blog post. I have a lot of blog posts. When you have so many pages, it actually takes some time to build create the HTML documents for each one of those. And so my build took about a half an hour to go through the whole build process, which was an enormous pain. Especially because Netlify would time out after 20 minutes. And actually on Netlify, my build could take even longer. So if what I had to do, because I couldn't build my site on Netlify where I was hosting this and where I was running CI, I had to get some help from Netlify to figure out how to cache stuff on my build so that I could run it once, warm up the cache a little bit, run it again, warm up the cache some more, and then run it one last time to finish warming up the cache and actually deploy. And once I had a warm cache and everything was fine, but warming up that cache was a real problem. And so then I could deploy my app after a change in about 15 minutes is how long it took. And so, I mean, 15 minutes is better than timing out, but it's still not great. And anytime I wanted to change anything, so like literally anything on the page, I had to rebuild the whole app and redeploy it. And it blows away the whole cache and everything. So it's not good for user experience either. And so even like fixing like a little typo somewhere is going to trigger a rebuild of the whole site. Well, Gatsby thought about this, and Vercel with their Next.js and their static site generation also thought about this and thought, hey, if they're just changing a typo on a blog post, then we can just rebuild that one page. We don't have to rebuild all of the pages. And that's with Next.js, that's called incremental static regeneration and Gatsby. And then there's also, I need to learn what the actual acronym for this is, but it's dynamic page regeneration or something like that. So these two solutions are intended to address that problem. But there are two problems with that. What if the change that I'm making happens to be on all of the pages? Well, then I'm back to square one where I have to rebuild every single page. So if I wanted to change from first name to just name, for example, then this is on every page. And so I've got to regenerate every page. We're back to square one. Also, that solution is a vendor specific solution. It'd be really cool if there was like a standard that I could build off of. But yeah, that's not the case with those solutions. Another problem that I ran into is on my workshops page. I've got all of these different workshops, and I wanted to be able to schedule a workshop on Tito, my ticketing service, and have the little component right here that would render how many tickets there were left, if there was a discount code available, and various things like that. And so if there are a couple of approaches that you can take to this. One way you could do this is because all of this, all these pages, those HTMLs created at build time, you could at build time go to the Tito API and say, hey, is this workshop scheduled? And if it is, then you can render the component. Otherwise, you don't. And that works out okay, except that what if somebody buys the last ticket? Well, now there are no tickets left, or they buy any ticket. I want to show how many tickets are left. Or what about when the discount goes out? So now you need to set up a webhook to trigger a rebuild of your website, which is fine. I'm pretty sure that Tito has webhooks. If they don't, then I can, of course, ask them and wait for them to build the webhooks that I need. Yeah, that works out, except again, it takes 15 minutes to deploy my site. And so that's not exactly real-time data. So what I did instead was I said, okay, well, let's have the browser do it. Have the browser go ask Tito, hey, are there any tickets? And I have a serverless function that I can call from my app that hits the serverless function. And then that serverless function hits the Tito API. So I don't have to expose private keys and stuff. And that works out okay, except that I now have a loading state because I can't load that as part of the build step anymore. And so when the build runs, I need to render something. And so here what I do is I actually render nothing. And then when the app hydrates, I render a loading state while I'm going to get the hit the Tito API. And so you'll see this bouncing in place, and you might think, well, Kent, why don't you just make a nicer loading state? And yes, of course I could, but even nice loading states are not a pleasant user experience. And it would be a lot nicer if it was just like, here, it shows me as soon as the app loads. I think that we've just gotten way too used to and the app loading partially and then incrementally loading more after the app is technically sort of loaded. And I think this is a shame. It would be really nice if I could just hit refresh and boom, it would be there rather than having to wait for that network request. And I'm not the only one that has problems with this. There are a lot of problems with this. And YouTube, despite having an enormous amount of budget and it being really important to be really fast, they have some serious issues. And I ran into an issue a few weeks ago when I was using YouTube where surprisingly, this was like a pretty serious bug, and I was really surprised by it. And when I went and investigated, this is what I found out. So I'm going to slow this down to 3G connection so that we can see what's going on. And I go to youtube.com, and the first thing that happens is it's loading the HTML document. And the HTML document that comes back has a loading state that's basically useless while it's loading this desktop Polymer script, which is very, very large. And so this loading state, it's not even the correct theme or anything. It's completely useless. But at least it's telling the user, hey, you have hit the right spot. But yeah, we're waiting for this desktop Polymer JavaScript file to load before anything renders. Even the search input isn't rendered until this desktop Polymer has been downloaded, which it's actually pretty confusing to me that they don't render the search input. But even when they do, when that desktop Polymer is finished, you'll notice I'm typing and hitting enter repeatedly. All that desktop Polymer did was make it so it could render stuff, but it didn't make it so that it could actually respond to user input. So now we're downloading another JavaScript file called base.js, which is going to enable us to actually type a search. This is not a good user experience. This is actually really bad. And like I said, it's something that I actually experienced in the real world. It's not something I just made up, and not just something you experience when you're on slow 3G. And so there are a couple of problems I want to call out to this. One of them is that we should not have to request some JavaScript that then requests some additional JavaScript. As soon as you see the URL and know where the user's trying to go, you should be able to know all of the things that they need and send it all. That would be the right thing to do. The next thing is this completely ignores the progressive enhancement, which is a thing that we've tried to encourage people to do for a long time, but just we haven't haven't really done. Like I said, I'm sorry that my throat is causing trouble. So this is not great. The web actually knows what to do with forms, and when we add a JavaScript, that should be making the site better, not just making it work. So the baseline should be a functional site, and then the JavaScript should just make the site function better. And with YouTube and many sites like it, if the JavaScript doesn't load, the app doesn't work at all. Or if in our case, if the JavaScript takes a long time to load, the user has to wait for all of the JavaScript to load before anything works. And that's not a great experience. So when I rewrote my site, I decided to switch to Remix. And I found out really quick that I could do a lot of really cool things that I never would have imagined doing on my old site. Now, for one, the workshops, they all load instantly. They're all right here. And so like I can hit the Tito API, whatever, and all on each one of the pages, I can list all of the workshops that are available, all of that stuff. It's awesome. So it's way, way faster in that way as a user. And then for the blogs, when I publish a new article, or if I need to make a typo fix or add a translation or anything like that, that gets updated in 8 seconds. And most of that time is just getting the GitHub action up and running. So that can get updated very, very fast because this is actually hitting the GitHub API to get all this content. And of course, I cache it. And that's why I have a GitHub action to go and invalidate the cache. But yeah, it runs really fast. It doesn't even redeploy my app. It just updates the cache, which is also super duper cool. And then I realized that I could do a lot of other really cool things on top of this. So I have user accounts where you can log in and choose a team, a color, and then the blog posts that you read, I keep track of those. And so when you read a blog post, it will add points for your team that you've chosen, and whoever is the leading team is the one that gets all the colors of the links and everything. And so it's kind of can turn it into a game. But then I also realized that because I'm server rendering and I'm keeping track of the blog posts that people are reading, I'm able to server render recommendations as well. And so we have one of these that's like completely random, one of them that is related to the blog post that you're reading, and another one that is like one of the most popular blog posts on the site. And this is random every time. It's unique for every user, and it will never have a blog post that you've read recently in here either. And I can refresh every time, and in the span of like less than a second, like 250 milliseconds, you get completely different recommendations for each one of these. And I think that's super cool. There were a lot of really cool things that I realized I could do when I threw away the idea of static site generation and decided to server render this thing. Another thing is the Call Kent podcast, where you can record yourself in the browser asking me a question, and I can record a response. And then my response is smashed together with your question and published as a podcast. And I think that's pretty cool. That's all happening on the node server that I'm running. Now, some of this stuff I could do with Gatsby, but I'd be or with Next.js and server-side rendering, but I'd be making a lot of trade-offs. And the other thing is the code for this stuff. I've never been able to do anything simpler, and so I'm really happy with the code that I created to create this website and this experience. So, with all of that said, I want to tell you a little bit about what makes Remix special. Why, aside from Remix enabling me to provide a better user experience than I'd ever been able to do before, what is it that makes Remix so awesome to work with? And what is it, what is Remix's distinguishing feature? The first thing that I want to call out is it's a really, really common question. People are always asking us about Remix versus Next. If you're coming from a Next background, you're probably wondering this right now. We have a very, very in-depth article that explains the differences between Remix and Next. The TLDR is Remix is as fast or faster than Next at serving static content, and Remix is definitely faster than Next at serving dynamic content. So if that piques your interest at all, then feel free to read that blog. And another common question we get is about React server components in Remix. And right now, the demos that they have and everything show that Remix with React 17 is better than everything that React 18 has to offer. And so we're not really, we're well positioned to adopt this if it does prove to be better in the future. And we are happy to do that if that ends up being the case. But right now, we're not jumping on board because it's not better than what we have already. Okay, so with those common questions out of the way, you can rest easy and focus on what makes Remix so special. You can look at those articles later. So I'm going to scroll through this website a little bit to talk about a couple of things. So for one thing, we're sick and tired of the web looking like this, where things are bouncing all over the place. The YouTube search doesn't even work or whatever. We're much more interested in our websites working as soon as they load and not have loading jank. Like, look at this. I don't even have to log in. You go to chase.com and look at how many spinners there are. Spin, 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 spin all over the place. This is a static page. They could totally render this thing statically. I don't know why they have spinners everywhere. Even when it's cached, it's like nuts. This is the world that we live in. We live in Spinageddon, and we are super done with that. I am super done with that. And that is one of the things that makes Remix special, is it enables us to do that, not just because of server rendering, but because it makes server rendering really, really fast, thanks to a lot of modern infrastructure and the approach that Remix takes. Another thing I want to call out is that Remix supports nested routing, which we're going to talk about later. But because Remix is your router, your bundler, and your data fetching library, it can do a lot of really cool things for you. So as the user's navigating around, if they're going over to a link, then Remix can say, oh, the user's going to click on that link. Let me go and prefetch all of this stuff. So we'll load your CSS, your JavaScript modules, your data, user data, whatever needs to be loaded. It'll prefetch all of that stuff for you. And so by the time the user actually clicks, it's all ready. It's all on. It's all in the browser cache. And so when the browser says, "Hey, I need that stuff," the browser, or when your app says, "Hey, I need that stuff," the browser's like, "Oh, sweet, I've already got this in my cache," and so you don't have loading states all over the place, and even after the user has landed on the page. So a lot of times frameworks are talking about how fast your app is to load, but they kind of forget about how fast your app is to respond to user interaction. At this point, I want to talk really quick about partial hydration. And I kind of hate to do this because Mishko is my friend, but that's not the site that I went to go to. Quick.js. I want to go to the Quick.js. Oh no, it's the Builder website. Yeah, builder.io. So Mishko, the creator of AngularJS, has been working on this framework called Quick.js, which he's really excited about. It seems really cool. And one of the, it kind of adopts not partial hydration. What he calls it is a resumable app. But it's kind of the same idea, is you don't have to load all the app code to get the app on the page. But the problem with that is, if you wait to load all of the app code until the user starts interacting with something, so you're partially hydrating or resuming different parts of the app, then when that user does interact with the thing, they have to wait for that JavaScript to load. So look at this. I'm not even throttling. And when I click on this menu icon, I want you to count how long it takes for the menu to show up. Ready? Click. Oh, that was really fast. Maybe I preloaded it or prefetched it now. Ah, man, I knew I should have recorded this. That's why I did the YouTube thing, because I figured one of these days they're going to fix it. And it looks like Mishko may have fixed this. So my guess is the way that he fixed this, and maybe I never even talked to him about it. I was going to tell him about it. But my guess is that the way that he fixed this is that he prefetched the code for this interaction because people were complaining about it. And when you start, and that's what I was going to suggest. But when you start prefetching things for partial hydration, you end up like, how do you know what to prefetch? How do you know what the user's going to click on? And so then you end up pretty much loading the entire application anyway. And so it just is not, we have not seen in our experimentation any situation where partial hydration makes sense, where it actually gives the user a better user experience. And so it's not just about how long does it take to get the user onto the page, it's about what is the user's experience when they get there. And what Remix says is we can be intelligent about hydrating the whole app. We just make sure that all the HTML is there up front. We progressively enhance it so that when the HTML is there, it's actually usable. And then, and so like, while the rest of the app is coming and we're hydrating, that doesn't mean that the app can't be used. It can. You can use it because we're progressively enhancing with JavaScript, not enabling the app to work. And then when we're prefetching as the user's navigating around, because of course we don't download the entire app, we're using regular link tags so that we're putting these assets into the browser cache, not into the into some in-memory cache that we manage ourselves. So we don't have to worry about memory management or garbage collection, or if the user closes the tab and opens it up again, or you have to refill that in-memory cache, or whatever. That's all managed by the browser cache. So using the platform, for the win, it's awesome. So loading data is something we talk about a lot, and I'm going to show you in my demo about that. We also talk a lot about prefetching or mutating data. Lots of frameworks don't handle that well, and Remix handles it really well. But I'm going to show that to you in the demo. So I'm going to, one thing I'm not going to show you in the demo is nested routing. So I'm going to call that out right here. So you've got an app, and most apps have several URL segments. And each one of those URL segments is associated to a particular part of the UI. So here we have the sales part of the UI. If I click on expenses, then this part of the UI is going to update. So, and the same for all of these. And inside of sales, you've got these different nav links as well. And so you have this, and then of course on the invoice, as you click these invoices, this part updates. So you have this nested structure, and that's really common for most apps. Maybe not all apps have this many segments, but having a nested structure makes a lot of sense for a lot of apps. And in fact, like on the Call Kent podcast, for example, we've got the root, and then we've got the calls page, and then we've got individual episodes where these are all individual sub-routes of the parent. So even on my site, which is relatively simple, we still have nested routing. So what in Next and Gatsby, they have nested routing from the file standpoint. So you have the pages directory, and then you have these different routes. And if you were to build this UI, you would say /sales /invoices /invoice ID with their brackets or whatever .tsx. And the difference between Gatsby and Next nested routing is that it's actually not true nested routing. Remix's nested routing is true nested routing, where the nesting involves the actual runtime and the UI. Where with Gatsby and Next, when you're working in that invoice ID route at the bottom of your file structure, that component, that module is responsible for the entire page when that route is active. In Remix, that module is only responsible for the part of the page that's relevant for this particular route. So that works out really nicely because, well, let me take a step back. It's not a huge deal for Next and Gatsby from the UI standpoint, because you can just make a component and reuse that. And it's not fun, but like it works. Like we have solutions for this. But what really makes it a pain is that nested route is not only responsible for the UI, but also the data that gets into the UI. And so if you want to server render this, you have to, every single route that renders that layout component needs to load the data for the layout component. Now, like, okay, fine, I'll just copy my GraphQL query or whatever. But no, that is such a pain. If you ever need to make a change, you got to update all of those routes. And so what do? What we often do is we say, hey, I want to co-locate these data requirements to the components that need them. So we'll do that. But now you have a waterfall effect and you have spinners all over the place. And we're just like, I mean, that's better than having to duplicate all this logic everywhere. So I guess, sure, let's do that. And then the user ends up with a bad experience. You're working on a team and one team is responsible for the shell of the application and one team is responsible for this page and that page, whatever. If that shell application team says, hey, listen, I need some additional props from you, now you have to go and communicate with all the other teams and make sure that they pass you the right props. And so now all of a sudden you're starting to think about, oh, maybe we should do iframes or microservices or something like that. In Remix, because of nested routing, you don't run into those problems very quickly at all. And so in Remix, if you've got a team that's responsible for the invoices page, they don't have to think about all of the parent at all. They are not thinking about it. They're thinking about, okay, here's my data for this, and here's my data for this, and then I'm going to render a child route. And you could have an entire team that's just responsible for this part right here, and they don't even have to communicate with the team that's rendering the invoices page. They not even a little bit. And they just render, here's how my invoice thing works, and here's how I get my data for it. And there's no waterfall effect at all. So having nested routing makes a big impact on the collaboration between teams, and or even if you're just like a solo developer, it makes it way easier for you to think about over the long term. So do not underestimate nested routing. It's huge. It is an enormous benefit of Remix. And another piece of this before we get to the demo is because of nested routing, we can also make error boundaries that server render. React error boundaries don't server render. So Remix error boundaries server render, and they're contextual. And so if we had some bad data for this particular invoice or something, and that blew up, then the error boundary that's rendered right here is contextual. The rest of the app still works. That is not how the web works today. That's not how people do it. The way people do it normally is if anything breaks on the page, they're going to render the header, the footer, and a little koala in the middle with a tear running down its face saying, sorry, something broke. And that is not a great user experience. So in Remix, the user experience is, oh, this part of the page broke, but the rest of the app works. You can click on a different invoice. That still works. And then you can report to the developers, hey, or to support personnel, hey, this invoice is busted. And they can say, oh, yeah, let's check out the data for that invoice. Huge, huge, huge benefit to the organization. So let's do this this demo, and then we can do some Q&A and stuff. Because I want to talk about data loading, data fetching, and progressive enhancement. Those are the things we're going to cover now. So I've got this notes, and I can say 1 and 2 and 3. I really need to add a button that adds those for me, so I don't have to do that during this demo. Yeah, so I can delete each one of these, and everything works as you would expect. So let me show you how this works. First of all, we're going to come down here to the notes page component. So in a Remix app, you have the app directory, you have this entry server. This is the first, or where you're responsible for responding to requests that are made. And so you are the one who's going to be calling render to string or render to stream or whatever thing React comes up with. Because you're responsible for calling it, you don't need Remix to support that. It already does, because all you need to do is send a response. So send it however you like. And so here we're rendering to a string. We're adding the doc type HTML and then just sending that as a HTML response. And then on the client, this is the first part of your code that runs on the client, and you're responsible for hydrating. And so that means you could even wrap this inside of a, like my provider or whatever if you needed to. And so you have a lot of power because you're responsible for hydrating the thing. That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty neat. So, and then the first component that's going to be rendered is your root component. And you're responsible for everything between the HTML, the opening HTML and the closing HTML. So, and then we give you nice APIs for meta tags and link tags. And then we give you the script tag so you can render the script or not if you don't want to. Progressive enhancement means that that actually could work. Yeah, and so you don't need anything like React Helmet or anything like that. We give you all of the APIs that you need for inserting meta tags into the meta, which is pretty cool. And you're responsible for all of this stuff, which means that there's no API for it. It's just like you are rendering it. So if you want to put a class name on here that's controlled by state, have at it. It's just right here. Okay, and then this outlet is React Router v6 outlet. And so that's saying, hey, if I have any children, this is where they go. And so when we're on the notes page, this notes page component is going to be rendered inside of that outlet position. Okay, so that's the way that everything is structured. So then here we're rendering our div. We've got a couple of forms. This might be unusual for some of you to see a form wrapped around a button that doesn't have any other inputs or anything. And also a form that doesn't have an on submit that has a prevent default or whatever. So this is a remix form and it has an action and a method. So that means we're going to post to the logout when this form is submitted. And this logout route just has this action that's going to perform a mutation. And then this is actually our code. So we're going to get the session from the request that just grabs that from the cookies. And then we say, okay, let's destroy that session. So we'll blow up that cookie and redirect the user to the login. So it's actually pretty straightforward, and it's all just using web APIs. Like this request thing is a web fetch request. If you go and dive into the type definitions, this is web fetch stuff, web fetch API. So a lot of people really enjoy working with Remix because they spend a lot more time on NDN learning about the web platform than they do in Remix learning about Remix, which is cool. This is one of the things I loved about React when I started using it, is I felt like the more I was using React, the better I was getting at JavaScript. Well, Remix is a web framework, not a React framework. So the more that it just happens to use React, but the more that you use Remix, the better you get at the web platform. So yeah, you can have a form and a button. And yeah, this thing does work without JavaScript. So if the user's just trying to get to your app so they can log out, then they don't have to wait for the JavaScript to load before they can click the log out button and get logged out. That's pretty cool. Okay, so then we have a form for our title for our note and a save button. And then if we have notes or no notes, so we're going to display no notes. Otherwise, we'll display all of the notes. And that will have a form for the delete. And so that's another interesting thing, is like a button. Typically, we're going to have an on-click that does a fetch request and sends some data or whatever. In this case, we're using the declarative API that the web has always had for mutations, and that is a form. And we're going to say we want to post. If you don't provide an action, then a form is going to post to the current URL. And so that's this route. We'll take a look at that in a second. And because we want to send some data, but in this case, we don't want to have the user whatever. We don't want to have the user type in the ID. We're going to just render a hidden form field, and that will go along with the post request. So that works out. Okay, so let's take a look at how this data comes in. So data is coming from this use loader data function, which is a React hook or a Remix hook. And the loader data is coming from this loader function. This function runs only on the server. This is huge. So you're responsible not for getting data into the browser. Remix is going to do that. You're responsible for getting data into the server, and then Remix will take it from your server into the browser. This is like a mind-boggling useful feature from Remix. So this means that you don't ever have to worry about loading states or error states or like managing those states at all. You don't have to worry about, okay, what if the user starts going here, but then they go here and then they decide to go back again? All of that stuff completely managed by Remix. Race conditions completely managed by Remix, and solved for everybody. And so we don't have to keep resolving the same problem in every app and every feature of an app that we are working on. It's all solved completely by Remix, because Remix is responsible for the network chasm. You just on the server, right? How do I get my data that this component needs? And then Remix will get that into the browser. That's huge. So I just noticed that my face just suddenly got big. Oh, because I was talking. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so the loader just runs on the server. The other really cool part about this is that the Remix is. Sorry, I just like quickly lost my train of thought. Because this just runs on the server, this is moving a ton of code over to the server from the browser. So one of the things that React Server Components is, or one of the reasons it's exciting, is because they're trying to get more code out of the browser and onto the server so that your app can load faster. Well, when React Server Components was first announced, I saw them and I was like really confused because I wasn't excited about it. And I was like, why am I not excited about that? I should be excited about this. And I realized it's because I don't have the problems that React Server Components solve. I don't, because I've been using Remix. So all of the code that is required to get data onto the page is on the server. And that means if you're using GraphQL, that library is not small, it's huge. You can do all of that on the server. It's not going to load in the browser. If you need to talk to a API that requires a private key, you don't need to make a serverless function or whatever. You can just put that in your loader and you don't worry about sharing the private key because it all is just running on the server. And that also means that if you need to talk directly to a database, you can do that because this is running on a server. That's what I'm doing here. Prisma is my ORM to talk to my database, and I'm looking up in my database what we're looking for. We can verify that the user's logged in by getting the user ID from their request, from their cookie. You don't have to save like a jot in the local storage or anything. This is all like, it's all just happening on the server. It's amazing. So that's the loader. That's getting data into the browser. You just tell Remix, what response should the user get when they're trying to get data for this page? And here we're just going to send some JSON. That's pretty cool. So then on the actions side of things, so when the user tries to create a new note, or when they try to delete one, then that is an action. And so Remix is going to call your action. And here we're going to get the user ID. And we have two things we can do on this one page. One is create a note, and the other is delete a note. And so we need to determine what the action type is. And so the web has a way to do this. You have a name on the submit button. And here we're going to call this an action. And the value is whatever we want to call it. So create note. And if we had two submit buttons in the same form, we can call them both action. And whichever button the user clicks on is what our action value will be. This is web platform stuff, nothing to do with Remix. Like I said, the better you get at Remix, the better you get at the web platform, because you're just using the web platform. Remix just exposes the web platform to you, which I love. I think it's so cool. And so, yeah, that's how we disambiguate between whether the user is trying to delete a note or if they're trying to create a new one. And, and so based on that, if they're deleting one, then we're going to do the delete stuff and redirect them back to the notes page. If they're creating one, then we'll create that note and redirect them back to the notes page in either case. And then, of course, we have errors that can happen and stuff too. So that is what I wanted to show you as far as like how this thing works in the first place. So now I want to show you how how we can make changes to this without completely changing the mental model. So this is actually a really basic implementation. And I'm going to show you how we can enhance this and make it better over time without completely changing the mental model. So now, like, you're an engineer coming into this and you're tasked with fixing bugs or enhancing the feature set of this page. How hard is it for you to do that? And I would be very surprised if you found any other way of building a web app that made it as easy as this. Okay, so first of all, let's talk a little bit about progressive enhancement. So I'm going to disable JavaScript just so that we can see what this is like while the JavaScript is loading, or if the JavaScript failed to load or something like that. I'm also going to turn on slow 3G so we can talk about it as it's happening. So there's no JavaScript on this page. If I type in a new note and hit save, we do have a loading indicator. Even though there's no JavaScript, the favicon is spinning. If you're on a mobile browser, it'll have like a little thing that spans across the top or whatever. It'll give the user some feedback that something's going on, because what happens when a form is submitted is that is a transition. It's like clicking on a link and sending some stuff to the page that you're going to. And so what happened in our network tab is we got a post, and that post has a payload. It says, here's the title and here's the create note. So without JavaScript, the browser knows what to do with forms. It's going to do it, and it's going to do it great. And here we're submitting the new note and create note, and you notice that it actually worked. So after this request was finished, we redirected back to the notes page, and so it went back to the server and said, "Hey, I need the notes page." And the server was like, "Okay, sweet. Let me go get all of the notes. Oh, it just so happens there's a note here now. Let me send that to you," and we render with the notes. So it works. It's amazing. And one thing that I will just make note of is the reason that we're instead of returning HTML from this note, we redirected, is because if you don't redirect on a post and then you hit the back button, you're going to resubmit that post. And that's why on like old banking websites and airline websites and stuff, they have this big thing that says don't hit the back button. And if you do, it like has this dialogue that says confirm resubmission, because most of the time you're doing a mutation when you post. You don't want to like book 2 flights or whatever. But if you redirect, you don't have that problem. And so that's why in Remix we say on a successful request, you want to redirect so that you don't have that problem. So yeah, in any case, we got the new notes. It's awesome. Same thing happens when we hit delete. So we get another loading spinner that we make the post request, we make a get, and now we have no notes. Perfect. Okay, progressive enhancement works. The app works before JavaScript. That is stellar. Like that a lot. Okay, so now we're going to enable JavaScript. Let me speed it up so I can refresh easily. And now slow it down. This time, I want you to watch what happens when we decide to navigate away, or when we create this new note. So here's my new note. And I want you to look. Do we have any loading indication of any kind other than what's in the network tab, which of course the user won't see? No, we don't have any loading indication. If I delete, the same thing happens. As a user, I'm like, wait, why didn't that work? And I'm going to hit delete 1,000,000 times, and it's not going to be great. So this is not a good user experience. What's going on here? Not great. So what happened is we added JavaScript, but what we've done is we progressively enhanced a worse experience. So we progressively dehanced the experience, if that's a word. We made it worse. And the reason that we made it worse is because we're not thinking about loading states. Now I know you're a smart developer. You would never build a thing like this without loading states. But for some reason, the engineer before you built this app. They forgot to turn on their JavaScript or something, and they saw that it was working okay, and so they moved on. And so now you're responsible for adding a loading state. So how hard is that to do? Well, remember, you're not responsible for doing data fetching or mutations. Remix is. And so Remix is managing all of that state for you. And if you were to console log right here, you're going to be like rendering, and you're going to be wondering why Remix is rendering so many times, or this component's re-rendering like 4 times when you make a mutation. You're like, why is it doing that? Nothing's changing. Well, things are happening. State is being updated, and we're about to use some of that state right now. So we're going to get what's called a transition. And this is from use transition from Remix. So this is what's called the transition manager, and it's going to tell us all the transitions that are happening. So remember, a form submission is a transition from one route to another. So in our case, we happen to be transitioning to the same route, but it is a transition nonetheless. And so when you submit a form, when you click a link, whatever, this transition is going to have the state for what's going on. And so we can determine if we are in an is saving state if the transition has a submission, a form submission, and that form submission has form data. Now this form data is actually the web form data. So it's like the form data object from the web platform. So another situation where you're getting something straight up from the libdom, which I think is so cool. So you're learning the web. If you've never used form data before, here it is. This is the web. But we're going to get the action. And if the action happens to be create note, then we know that we're saving. So the user is doing a transition that has form data, and that has a submission. So it's a submission transition. And that has form data where the action is create note. So we know that we're saving. And so now we can say, if we're saving, then we do saving, ... Otherwise, save. And then disabled, we'll disable the button if we're saving too. And so now I come over here. Now let's refresh and not throttle so we don't have to wait for that. And now we're on slow 3G. We say new note, and I click on save, and I'm getting a nice pending state. Now you can make this even better. You can have like a spinner or something. On my website, if you go really fast to the chats page, I still need to figure out why this page is a little slow. But if you click on this really fast, you'll see a loading spinner in the bottom. So you have mechanisms for showing loading states anywhere in the app. When a transition is happening, you have access to that anywhere. And you can be as contextual or as global as you want it to be. And in our case, we were, really contextual. So that's cool. Let's do the same thing for our note display. So we're going to grab the use transition again. And we're going to say is deleting. And we know that, thank you, autopilot or copilot. We know that if the form data action is delete note, but we can have a couple of these on the page at once, right? So we need to disambiguate. And we know that we're deleting this one if the note ID is the note ID that we're currently rendering. So we'll say, and thank you, auto or copilot. So, and if the transition submission form data node ID is the same as the node ID we're rendering. So now we know that we're deleting this one. And so we can disable the button, disabled, and deleting or delete. Okay, so with that, let's speed this up and refresh. Really easy. Slow it down again. Actually, let's speed it up so I can add a couple. 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. So we've got a bunch of these. And so now I can delete. And we get, let's speed it or slow it down so we can see it happen. Delete ... Cool. So I've got a loading state, and I'm progressively enhanced because now my loading state is contextual. So the experience is better. That's great. Really happy about this. And it was like, that's literally all it took to find out if the transition I was having was a result of this particular form being submitted. Yeah, good luck finding something else that makes it that easy. No use state, no use effect. It's all gone. Like, the amount of things that you don't have to think about when Remix has this solid bridge across the network chasm is mind-boggling, or not mind-boggling, I guess. It's like you don't have to think about it. It's so great. So I want to talk about another problem that we've got. So when I submit this note display delete button, then I'm going to go to the action. I'm going to delete the note, and then I'm going to redirect back to the notes page. So there are a couple different ways that we do things on the web. So in the beginning days, it was, okay, you do this post, you redirect to do things properly, so that you don't end up with confirm resubmission back buttons. And every single page is a full page refresh. With the modern web, every single time you click a button, it's not a full page refresh. You don't have to do a full page refresh, which is nice. We don't want to have to do that. It's better for accessibility, all of those things. So, but sometimes if I'm going to like create a note, let's say that I have a note details page. So in that case, I'm going to create the note. I'm going to navigate to the note details page. And then on the note details page, I've got a delete button. I click delete. I want to navigate back to the notes page. So like navigations for form submissions makes a lot of sense and is a good default. But in our case, we're not navigating between different pages. We're staying on the same page. And so by making our forms modeled after navigations, it doesn't quite make sense. And in addition, it adds a bunch of items to our history stack, which is not great. If I click back button, I'm staying on this page. That's not awesome. And so on top of that, because the only one transition can happen at a time, look what happens when I try to delete all of these notes in quick succession. So delete, 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 delete. And only one of them can say that it's deleting at a time because only one of them can be transitioned to at a time. You can't transition to 2 pages at once. If we go to, I don't know, let's go to Google. We'll search for Studio C. And then I'm going to disable, here, no throttling. We're going to, here, disable JavaScript and refresh. Okay, so this is what Google does when you don't have JavaScript enabled. I've never done this before, but it looks like what it does is it will render, it probably renders a meta tag that redirects you for the no JavaScript situation and redirects you to the no JavaScript page, which is actually kind of funny to me. But anyway, if we slow this down and click on a bunch of links, so I'm going to click and then click and then click and then we'll click and we keep on changing which one of these links we want to go to. What the browser does is it's going to cancel all of those previous things that you were going to go to because those redirections don't make any sense anymore. And so that's what Remix does. And the browser does the same thing for form submissions as well. So that's what Remix does is if you resubmit a form that ends up being a navigation, Remix will say, oh, so let's cancel the previous navigation. They want to go here now. So Remix simulates that same thing, which is correct. And that's really cool that Remix manages that for you. You don't have to think about, oh, cancel the request, whatever. So Remix handles form resubmissions for you, which is really cool. And yeah, because the transitions are global for the application, you can only do one transition at a time. But that doesn't work out for us exactly because in our case, we actually, oh, and one other thing I wanted to call out was even though the user experience wasn't great, by the end of it all, it's correct. Look, there are no notes. I clicked on all the delete buttons. They're all gone. We didn't have to manage any of that, which is super cool. So we're just going to make this experience a little bit better. Like I said, while transitions between different form submissions make sense for some situations, it doesn't make sense for this one. And so we're going to make this change. So the first thing we're going to do is, and we're just going to do this for the delete note because it's the same thing for create. We'll just do it for delete. So the first thing we're going to do is we're no longer going to redirect. Maybe we could like be smart about this and be like, if there is JavaScript on the page, then don't do a redirect. If there isn't, then let's do a redirect. But whatever we want to do here, we're just going to send a new response. We actually don't even care what the response says. We could say it worked. It doesn't matter to us because we're not going to actually care about this response anyway. So now we're not sending a redirect is the point. And then instead of use transition, we're going, because use transition is global for the app. You can only have one transition at a time, but we want to be able to do multiple fetch requests at the same time. And so instead, we're going to use something called use fetcher. Use fetcher is another hook from Remix, and it has the same API as transition. So I'm going to just rename this to fetcher. And then instead of using the global form, which does a transition and works with the global transition manager, I'm going to use the form that's specific to this fetcher. And boom, I'm done. I changed what the action does to make it not redirect. I changed use transition from the global transition to a fetcher. And I changed from the global form, global transition form to a fetcher form. And that is it. Mental model is the same. It is the same. And the minimal change is done. And this is sick, my friends. So check this out. We'll go actually here. Let's speed it up so we can add it. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll slow this down. and close all that and delete, 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 delete. Boom. And Remix manages updating all of the data for me. So you notice, like, I don't have to use state and say like, oh, when they delete it, let's like remove it or whatever. They're all gone. It's awesome. And let me show you something else that is really, really cool. As fun as it is to see those, deleting ... it would be even cooler if we can make it more optimistic than that. So when you go to like Twitter and you have a tweet that you want to like, you click the heart and immediately it turns red. It is not that fast to like a tweet. It does have to send a request. And so what they're doing is what's called optimistic UI. It's a really common pattern for that sort of interaction, where we're just going to optimistically assume that this is going to work. And that's great and all, but what if the tweet was deleted? Well, when that comes back, it's going to say tweet was deleted, sorry. And you're going to get a little message that says, sorry, the tweet was deleted. And so then like you can, continue doom scrolling or whatever. But from a coding standpoint, that's a little tricky because you had to make some state updates to say, hey, this is favorited, pretend favorited. And then when the response comes back that says the tweet was deleted, you have to undo, you have to roll back all of the optimism. Your optimism was misplaced. And so that's always been a challenge. I've built optimistic UI in Backbone, Angular, and React. And React Query was actually the easiest mechanism for optimistic UI that I've ever seen, until I saw Remix. Now watch this, friends. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come to my backend and I'm going to say on delete, we're going to say if math.random is less than 5, we're going to return a new response that says, oh no, something went wrong. And like you'd want to like actually send something useful or whatever, but we're just going to not delete it. Say something went wrong, no good. And here we'll make a status 500. It was my fault. I don't know. Who knows what went wrong? And so with that in place, actually, yeah. Well, here's what that looks like without optimistic UI. So we're going to say slow 3G, I'm going to delete, 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 delete. And one of those is probably going to fail. Yeah, one of them failed. And when it's all said and done, it's still there. So like the right thing happened, right? Remix made sure that the data that's on the page is correct. So that's cool. But let's make this even cooler. So I've got 1, let's add 2, 3, and 4. And now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, hey, let's be a little optimistic about this. Let's say if we are in a deleting state, let's return nothing. We're going to not render anything for this note display component because it's going to be gone in a second anyway. Or at least that's our hope. That's the optimistic UI hope. So rather than rendering a disabled and a deleting ... we're just going to render nothing. And so now we come back over here, we go to slow 3G and I say delete, 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 delete. They're all gone. And from my perspective, I'm like, sweet, that's awesome. But then one of them comes back and we could like or 2 of them, it looks like, and we could show a message that said, sorry, this one failed to delete for some reason, whatever. But we didn't have to worry about rollback. That's huge. That is so easy to get wrong. And it's so easy to get wrong that people don't typically use optimistic UI. And so you end up with a loading spinner all over the place. And so now you can easily do optimistic UI and not worry about rollback. That's enormous. That's an awesome, awesome feature. So that is my demo that I wanted to share with you. I've noticed a couple questions coming into the YouTube comments. So I'll go ahead and address those and then I'll let folks come in and we can wrap things up. So I noticed one question or one person asked about is there still use case in Remix of when you need to use, oh, actually, you know what? Before I answer these questions, sorry, I want to say one other thing before people start taking off. I want to invite you to go to remix.run, scroll down here to the bottom and join our Discord server. We have an awesome, awesome Discord, really sweet community of really cool people. So join our Discord. Our YouTube channel is sick. Lots of really cool content on there. And then of course, follow us on Twitter. And then we have GitHub. Our GitHub discussions are pretty active. We also have Remix Conf. So if you want to come have a really awesome time with a lot of really awesome people, then come to RemixConf in Salt Lake City in May. Yes, it will be live streamed. And so if you can't make it, you can still watch. And the talks are going to be recorded and uploaded later, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch those later. Yeah, and on Monday or Tuesday, yeah, probably Monday, we're going to announce all the rest of the speakers. So super, super cool. Okay, so with that, let's answer the questions people were asking. So yeah, is there still a use case in Remix when you need use effect, use layout, and use state? So use state, yes, there is. So if you have some state that is not persisted, for example, you've got like a combo box that opens up as the user's typing or something, that's going to be a use state situation. So like what's really cool is most of the use state stuff is going to happen inside of reusable components. So at a company, you're going to have a component library team that's building all of the reusable components for all of your apps. Or at least maybe even if you just have one app, you have a component library team that's building the reusable components for that app. And everybody else is just using those components and using Remix. And so for regular product development, no, you don't really have many use cases for use state. Use effect is still useful for managing focus. So even product engineers will use that, but you don't have to worry about dependency arrays. You don't have to worry about use callback. Like so many things you don't typically do when you're using Remix. It's awesome. Ronnie is asking, is the use transition a global context-free application? I think I answered that later on in the talk, but yes, it is. If you want to have something that's local, then you use fetcher. Jorge is asking, so fetcher allows to run kind of a concat map instead transition that behaves like a switch map. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by concat map and switch map, so sorry. But if that's how you understand it, then hopefully that's correct. Okay, and Remix is awesome, I agree. How do we access the failed state? So yeah, that's a great question. So here, if I wanted to fill this out like more correctly, then what I'd probably do is I'd return JSON and say, here's my response that has error, random error. And then my status would probably be like a 400, they submitted it wrong or something like that. And then down in here, I can say, let's see, it's fetcher dot data is what I'm going to get back in there. And so then I can render that. If it's a global transition, then you have action data, use action data. And so then you can get that, whatever the action returned in the action data. So that's how you do that. Okay. Yeah, our community in Discord is awesome. Ooh, thanks, Edison. Is Remix compatible with React existing libraries? Yes. So yeah, it's completely compatible. There are some React libraries that don't support server rendering, and that's fine. If that like doesn't matter, if you don't need it to be server rendered, you literally just say is mounted, use is mounted. Like you can find a million of those hooks. Like just Google that, you'll find it. And then you say if or yeah, return your div is mounted, then render the client only component, otherwise render null, or a loading state or something like that. So even if the library that you're using doesn't support server rendering, it's actually really easy to still use it. So yeah, Remix supports all React libraries. Okay, what is the need in terms of infrastructure for a Remix app? That's a great question. So in the docs here, we have this this page on server adapters. And so you can run Remix in Express. So deploy it anywhere you can deploy Express, like or a Docker container or whatever. Architect is for AWS, or deploy it directly to AWS by yourself. Architect just makes that a little easier. Amplify is working on an adapter as well. We support Vercel and Netlify, Cloudflare workers, and you can build your own adapters. These adapters are like 200 lines long. So yeah, you can deploy it anywhere that you can run JavaScript. You can run Remix. So even like Cloudflare workers, for example, That is not a node environment. That is a V8 isolate. So you cannot run Next.js on Cloudflare Workers, for example, but you can run Remix on Cloudflare Workers. Fastly has their something. AWS Lambda at Edge also is a V8 isolate sort of thing. And then Dino, we like next week, Dino support is, I think, going to come out of experimental. So yeah, you can, anywhere JavaScript is run, you can run Remix, which is pretty sick. Okay, how does Remix handle race conditions when you receive different results? Yeah, so what can happen sometimes in the web is you send request 1 and then request 2, and then something ties up request 1 for some reason, and request 2 comes back first, and then request 1 comes back. This is called a race condition, and what most apps do when a race condition happens is most apps will update the state based on the last request to come back, and that is incorrect. What you want to do is update the state based on the last request that was sent from the server, or the last response that was sent from the server. Remix does this, and it's completely managed by Remix, so you never have to worry about it. Yeah, and the reason that you care about the last response that was sent from the server is because that's the one that's going to have the most, the latest up-to-date information. And so Remix completely solves that. You do not have that problem when you're using Remix. It's awesome. Okay, so since Remix solves some of the problems that React tries to solve, for example, think about suspense. What do you think Remix means for an evolution of React from now on? That is a great question. Honestly, I don't know. React 17 is working great for me and my apps. So, I mean, if React suspense comes out and concurrent features and stuff come out and end up making things even better, we are super well positioned to adopt those things. So if we're like, hey, let's make this a server component, boom, now it's a server component. Now, of course, that's not the way it works right now because we don't support server components yet because they don't make things better. But if they ever did, then that's how hard it would be to support them from the user experience standpoint. So if that's what you want, that's great. It works awesome. Yeah, as far as like, what does it mean for React? I don't know. I'm not sure like what React is lacking. Now we are going to support Preact in the future. And when we support Preact, that means we need to have a framework agnostic router, which we will eventually have. And when you have a framework agnostic router, a framework agnostic data fetching library, framework agnostic bundler, then all of a sudden your choices for UI libraries grows a lot. And so we'll see what the future holds. We are only planning on supporting Preact and React directly, but I foresee somebody deciding that they want to support or want to try Vue or Svelte or something and making that work with Remix. So is there an optimization for images like the next image component? Not yet, but it's like not a terribly difficult thing to build. I have a really awesome image component that goes a little bit overboard myself. And so like all of the images that I have on my app use this strategy that you can read about and borrow. You don't have to do all of the stuff that I do. Like I said, I kind of go overboard, but it ends up being a really awesome image component that you can use. And we are eventually planning on shipping something built into the framework. But yeah, Remix is powerful enough that you don't need Remix to have it for you to be able to benefit from it. And additionally, what's interesting about the next image component is, let's see, stored next stored demo. Yeah, here we go. Their image component does not work without JavaScript. And so if you go to here, let's not slow this down. Let's go plenty fast. Their image optimizer for this like primary image right here, it doesn't work without JavaScript. This is an unfortunate oversight. I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure they know about this and they'll fix it eventually. But yeah, that is unfortunate that it does not work without JavaScript. So yeah, we're going to have something and it will work without JavaScript. Okay, is there any need of use memo or memo in Remix? I have not used use memo once in. Oh, hold on a second. Let me clarify that or make sure. So let me go to my own app, go use memo, and look in the app directory because I've got stuff that's in my content that would show up here. So I do. Okay, so for my recorder, that when you hit the record button and stuff, I have that for the audio URL. That's just to optimize that a little bit so that we're not calling this create object URL. I'm using it. Oh, whoops. Use memo. Using it in, the recorder again. Matching blog posts. Oh yeah, I'm doing some fancy things on my blog page to make it so that you don't have to make server requests to get blog results. An MDX component. This is like the recommended way to use MDX bundler. And then use debounce. What am I using use debounce for? Let's find use debounce. Use debounce. What am I? Oh, right. So for my admin page, I list all of the users on the page, and as I type, it'll search them, and I don't want to search instantly. So I'm using use memo for that. So you don't typically have the sorts of use memo use cases in Remix that you have in other apps. You certainly don't need it for like use effect dependencies most of the time, which is pretty sweet. Is there a lot of overlap in using Remix and React Query in the same app? So you can use them both, but you don't need it. You don't need React Query. Remix handles everything that you need. So that's cool. What about Solid.js? I think I kind of answered that. We'll see what the future holds there. Where would you add content security policies for every page in Remix? So you're responsible for everything that happens between the open HTML and the closing HTML. You're responsible for the server response, for handling every request. There's also a export function handle data request. So as the user's navigating around, we make requests to go get loader data and stuff. So you're responsible for the response that happens there. If you don't provide anything, we of course will just handle the response ourselves. Any content or security policy. You can also use the Express adapter, and now all of a sudden you have all the middleware and everything that you want there too. So that is Remix, and that is all the questions. So I'm done. Thanks everybody for coming, and I will wait to be joined by our friends.
All right. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Kenzie. I'm pretty sure that everybody enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. It's amazing. I think I'm not going to have a good sleep tonight. I'll be playing around.
Well, have fun with Remix at least then.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. One quick note. There's an existing Remix meetup in Costa Rica. Edison Romero is leading that effort. So if you want to meet the community, please just search for Remix Costa Rica on meetup.com. The intention of that specific community is just to focus all the discussions around Remix. I know that here in React Costa Rica, we also discuss about it, but also a lot of different stuff. So if you want something focused, you can join the community in there. At the end, we are all part of the same group of people, right? So yeah, the next thing, we have some raffles. I shared a link in the YouTube discussion. If you want to participate in that raffle, just please go ahead and fill in your information in there. So far, we have just 7 responses, so please be quick, and I guess that we will have some more minutes to complete that. And thank you so much, Kenzie, and it was really a pleasure to have you here tonight. And I hope that this is not the last time.
Yeah, well, the pleasure is all mine. I'd love to do this again sometime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, people. Let's see. It's 7:50. Let's wait 2 more minutes to have some more entries in the raffle form. And then I will grab the names and basically just spin the wheel to see who are the winners. We have 2 Firesticks, if I'm not mistaken, and also Platzi subscription for a year. Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, let's see. Hey, Wayo. So, what do you think about it?
Well, it was amazing. The only problem is that now I want to migrate all my applications to Remix,
I
and
knew.
that's definitely a problem. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, but it's amazing. It's amazing that Remix solves so many problems that other frameworks don't really even try to solve. Uh, I think most of the frameworks that I've ever tried in my life, they just don't ever use all the web things that are available. Like there are web APIs that you can use. For example, all the caching stuff that Remix does, I find that really interesting and really useful. And it's a completely different pattern from what I've been using for so many years. So I'm super excited about Remix. It's really promising.
Yeah, one of the things that really hooked me in was that simplicity. For example, with the forms, just having an action and a method, and that's it. It reminded me of when I started working as a web developer, where we have just really simple clients and we don't have anything like preventing the form submissions and stuff like that. So basically just sending an action to the backend and that's it. And it's
Mhm.
amazing how progressive they are taking this approach of taking advantage of that, but also using modern technologies like React and fetching in the client, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I find really interesting is that it's like the journey that web development has had. At some point, Jamstack was like the ultimate thing. Just pre-rendering your application was something very popular, and that many of us were doing, and very excited about that. But this is like a combination of approaches of server-side rendering and at least trying to cache as much as you can. So it brings so many concepts from different approaches, and I think it's a great combination of technologies.
Yeah, I agree. So let's see. It's been like 3 more minutes and we have 20 entries. I think that we can go ahead and make the raffle. So
Awesome.
I'll stop accepting responses at this moment. And now let me get the names and we can spin the wheel.
Is that something you can do sharing your screen, Arturo?
Yeah, I'm just preparing the wheel. But 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm ready. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's do it this way. First prize is going to be a Fire Stick. And it goes to Mike. Huh, familiar face. Congrats, Mike. We will reach reach out to send you the Firestick. Okay, then we can go with the Platzi subscription for 1 year. Andres Romero. All right. Let me take a quick note over here just to don't forget the names, even though we are recording this. So. And finally, the second Firestick goes to Jorge Ramirez Zamora. Well, I think that's it, everybody. It was a pleasure to host this event today, and I hope that all of you enjoyed as much as I did. And yeah, let's keep around. Remember, please to join us on Slack. You can search for us as React Costa Rica. And as I mentioned, there's also a growing community around Remix in Costa Rica. So Edison Romero is leading that effort. You can search for Remix Costa Rica. And yeah, well, see you around. Thank you so much for spending the time with us tonight, and see you later.